Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about a case where, to be honest, I saw the headline and was like, what did I just read? So we're gonna go through it. It's a little bit of a longer article, so I'll link it down below. Courtroom theater helps Texas prosecutor convict blue-eyed butcher Susan Wright. Susan Wright said it was self-defense when she tied her husband, Jeff Wright, to the bed and stabbed him a whopping 193 times. So I think y'all can see why I was like, what is this? What is going on? Now I will say it's always the same thing, and we've seen this since like the 60s at least. Naming killers, trying to make them personable in some way, like, oh, they're not a killer, they're this blue-eyed blonde killer. It's like, okay, well, it's like when they name Zodiac and shit like that. It just never ends well. It always creates a kind of, I don't want to say mass hysteria, but it's just like, okay, they're a killer. It's not that they're a blonde killer. Like I would understand if they had some trait that makes them particularly distinctive. Like having blue eyes are pretty sure, but you're not the only one. If it were a killer that was tattooed from head to toe with skulls and bones all over, then that's a little bit rarer and it makes sense to be like so-and-so killer, but regardless. To be clear, I do think that having some kind of anthology with any killer is going to be dangerous and it will get the crazies out here being stands for serial killers. I'm just saying it makes sense to me if they are particularly distinctive. Also, so they're more easily recognizable, because just saying, oh yes, this blonde blue-eyed killer, like girl, you could meet like 70 of those on the way to the grocery store. It's someone who is fully tattooed with crosses and skulls and bones all over their body. That's actually useful in terms of gathering information if they haven't been caught yet. So I still think it's dangerous. I just understand one more than the other. Tough as nails veteran prosecutor Kelly Siegler is giving Oxygen audiences a front row seat into some Texas-sized justice, beginning with a father who was stabbed 193 times. Siegler takes viewers to the Harris County Evidence Archives to review one of the hundreds of cases covered across her 21-year-long career. In this case, a broken knife, shovel, and parts of a bed helped her recall a grisly 2003 murder of a man buried at his Houston area residence. I haven't seen this stuff in over 20 years, and looking through all this makes me feel like I'm right back in that courtroom all over again. A defense attorney sends deputies to a grisly crime scene. On the evening of January 18, 2003, a defense attorney entered the Harris County District Attorney's office claiming that investigators could find a dead body behind a Berry Tree Drive address. It wasn't long before investigators, including Siegler, deduced that the attorney provided legal representation for someone with direct knowledge of the person's death. Deputies with the Harris County Sheriff's Office were on the case, arriving at the residence in the middle of the night. When they looked inside the patio portion, they saw the head and shoulder of what they believed to be a male subject. On the partially buried body, investigators found ligatures and cloth wrapped around the victim's wrists and ankles, plus a massive amount of stab wounds, HCSO Sergeant Mark Reynolds told Prosecuting Evil. Nearby, a hunting knife, believed to be the murder weapon, was discovered in a flower pot. There were all these things in the backyard that should have been in the house: a mattress that was bloody, the sideboards, the headboards, the footboard, said Siegler. It was just chaos. See, now, one thing I will say about crime scenes like this is, now obviously the crime is what's disturbing. Duh. But I feel like there's, and I think it's the uncanny. I really do think this is Freud's uncanny, where something is slightly off, but not super off. Like, yeah, obviously seeing something bloody, sure. But it's like if you see a mattress in a yard, you're gonna be like, that's weird. And then if like one of the doors of the house is slightly ajar, then you're like, huh, okay. and it gets progressively and progressively more disturbing, even though you haven't actually seen something straight up disturbing, like, obviously seeing a body, that would be, but these household items being out of place or something looking just slightly off. I feel like, at least for me, in a lot of horror movies, that's actually what does it, is that everything looks kind of off, but you can't really tell exactly why, or you feel like it shouldn't be as big of a deal as it is, and so you brush it off knowing full well something very bad happened here. Inside the home, investigators found the main bedroom in complete disarray, something Reynolds compared to a tornado. Someone had also attempted to clean up based on painting equipment and bleach found at the crime scene, though blood spatter remained on the walls and nightstand. Fingerprint analysis concluded the body belonged to Houston father of two, Jeff Wright, but his wife, Susan Wright, and their two children were nowhere to be found. However, after speaking with relatives, detectives learned Susan Wright had recently checked herself into a psychiatric facility, and the two young children were thankfully safe with family members. Susan Wright's claims of domestic violence. Days after the gruesome discovery, the medical examiner concluded Jeff Wright was stabbed a whopping 193 times. The murder was so brutal that the tip of the knife, which matched the one found in the flower pot, was found inside the victim's head. Pre-mortem nicks were present on the victim's penis and eyeball, something Kelly Siegler considered signs of torture. Red wax was also found on the victim's legs and around the groin. Looking into the married couple's most recent activity, homicide detectives learned that just 3 days before law enforcement found Jeff's body, on January 15, 2003, Susan filed a domestic violence complaint against Jeff with the Harris County Constable. In her filings, Susan accused Jeff of assaulting her and their young son. Susan also claimed Jeff was prone to cocaine-fueled rages, which supported the post-mortem reports revealing positive signs of the drug. Others, like Jeff's friend Retha Pyle, were less inclined to believe there was domestic abuse in the household. The Jeff that I knew, he would never abuse his children. Pyle told Prosecuting Evil he loved them so much. Now, I'm not gonna try and discredit anything, but it's never who you think. Like, most people don't have friends that they're like, yeah, they could totally be a murderer, a rapist, a torturer. Most people aren't friends with those people. Hence, you would never know. So again, it's not to discredit, but there aren't many people who can say, ah, yeah, totally called Ted Bundy was a murderer. During the investigation, Susan refused to speak with law enforcement, only corresponding through her attorney. On Susan's behalf, her attorney released a public statement claiming Jeff abused his client over a 4-year period. For Kelly Siegler, who herself grew up in an abusive household, the case became a personal one. I was never just going to discount a woman saying she was abused and blow it off, Siegler told Prosecuting Evil. That was never going to happen, but I also wanted proof. On January 23, 2003, Susan Wright was charged with murdering her husband, purportedly on January 13th, 2003, 5 days before Jeff's body was discovered at his home. Accompanied by her attorney, she surrendered to authorities the following day, pleaded not guilty, and was released on bond. Siegler, working on the prosecution, believed Susan killed Jeff, filed a domestic violence complaint, retained an attorney, and then entered a mental health facility to hide from police in that order. Defense attorneys preferred Susan killed Jeff in an act of self-defense, citing photos taken with the county constable's office, which showed scratches and bruises on Susan's body. I think that Susan might have gotten a couple of bruises from murdering Jeffrey, Siegler told Prosecuting Evil. She might even have got the scratches from the knife she was holding, but I guess she got the most of the bruises from pulling apart a 4-poster bed and dragging a 220-pound body across her bedroom, across her patio, and putting him in that hole. She probably got pretty dinged up doing all that. The prosecution alleged self-defense wasn't plausible given the victim was tied and restrained for the duration of the killing. As for a motive, they believed Susan murdered Jeff because she didn't want a divorce, while also factoring in a $200,000 life insurance policy against the husband. So this is what I always think is most interesting about these cases, is how people act in court and how that gets torn apart. I mean, analyzed to a degree, but also torn apart with a lot of people assuming a lot of things. So it's interesting where people's minds go based on the courtroom behavior. Siegler's courtroom manner drew controversy, especially in that she chose to have the bed in which Jeff was killed, carried into the courthouse and constructed before the jurors. You gotta make it come alive. You can't just sit in your chair and talk to the witness and stand and discuss theoretically. Siegler told Prosecuting Evil, you gotta make it hit home to a jury. Hit him upside the head with it, that's what you have to do. And to be fair, this makes sense. I do think that there has to be a level of reality of like, hey, these aren't just pictures, these aren't just like pieces of evidence in some locker, like these are real things where people were hurt, tortured, whatever the case is. Siegler thought of the bed as the murder weapon, just like the knife, reenacting what she believed happened on the night of the murder. She used Sergeant Reynolds and another prosecutor to help portray how Susan straddled her husband, tied him to the bed before stabbing him to death. According to Siegler, Susan sexually lured Jeff, accounting for why candle wax was found on his body. The reenactment of the killing would make headlines, stirring controversy and praise within the courts. What Kelly did, recreating her take of what happened, was genius, defense attorney and legal analyst Brian Weiss told Prosecuting Evil. It was courtroom theater. According to Susan, on January 13th, Jeff came home from a boxing lesson in an agitated and excited state. He began sparring with their son by making jabs at Bradley's head. Susan said she attempted to try and talk to Jeff into seeking help for his cocaine addiction and anger issues, but then Jeff allegedly produced a knife, which Susan said she wrestled from his grip. Susan said she somehow tied Jeff up and got him into the bed, killing him for fear he'd retaliate for her overpowering him during the fight. She also claimed the candle wax wound up on the victim's groin after she stabbed him and dragged him from the bed, accidentally hitting the nightstand during the process. So Susan was initially sentenced to 25 years in prison. However, after multiple appeals, Susan was afforded a new sentencing hearing and resentenced to 20 years behind bars. Now, I'll link the rest of the article down below because there are a lot of quotes that I don't think are super necessary for the context, but you might be interested in reading. It's always crazy how when it's women in these cases, and you guys know I don't like making things gendered if I can avoid it, like unless it actually makes sense. But in these cases, it's the blue-eyed blonde, right, who like had this crazy sex luring scheme, and it's just like, that is possible. Granted, I'm not saying it's not true, but it's interesting, and we see this with other cases I've covered, like with female pedophiles. How many times have we seen like the high school teacher being turned into this kind of sex fiend? I mean, like, surely there are people who do that with men, but it's not like the public consensus to do that. And it really scares me because it's like, okay, her sentence only got reduced from like 25 to 20, so that's not too bad. But it's also like, where do we draw the line? Because this isn't entertainment. Like, we can talk about it, we can have an informed discussion, but it's not hee hee ha ha, what did she do? And I think there's a difference between talking about things and being honest and open versus turning it into a little bit of theater, which they said they did. Anyway, you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you've heard of this case, like I said, I will link it down below in case you want more people's commentary on it. But honestly, I think I included everything that was pertinent for you to have a general idea of what occurred. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.